Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I have a question. Do all children deserve a safety net?
Amen.
Well, I am so excited and so proud to be among some of the most outstanding men and women in Detroit. I have the pleasure of chairing the Family and Community Work Group for Promised Neighborhoods. And it is with distinct pleasure that I would like to list off the names of folks who have been meeting with me every 2 to 3 weeks because they too are committed to creating a safety net for all children in Clark Park and Osborn. And so please join me in giving thanks and recognition to the individuals that we are going to recognize on this committee. And for those of you who are here, please stand. Blanca Almanza, Amy Amador, Carla Bautista, who I saw earlier, Anthony Benavides, Norman Bent, who I saw earlier, I don't know if he's still among us, Charlonda Buckman, Kenneth Coleman, Nancy Colon, Cara Graninger, Tracy Green, Christina Guzman, who's still here, Quincy Jones. Am I in the wrong one? One more. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Miss Mabel Love, who I saw earlier. Elizabeth Mack. Sandra Ramokan. Angela Reyes. Osvaldo Rivera, who I saw earlier. Mr. Smith, who I saw earlier. Wonderful. Jamila Weathers. And Christy Wilkowitz on behalf of Henry Ford Health System. Would you please join me in a wonderful round of applause? One of the things that I think is significant before we move on to the next slide is that this committee spent at least 2 meetings closely studying the community revitalization plans that the members or residents of Osborn and Clark Park put together and were published in 2010 for the Skillman's Good Neighborhood Initiative. And so this committee grounded itself in what over 500 residents of Osborn and Clark Park said that they wanted to see in their community. So the work that this committee is doing isn't, so to speak, in a cloud. It is entirely focused on what it was that the residents said that they wanted to see their community look like, their communities look like. So this committee is purposed with developing what the Department of Education calls a pipeline. It is a list of resources, more than just a list. It really is intended to be the safety net for children in Osborn and Clark Park, of providers, whether they're providers who provide recreation like Anthony Benavides does, or tutoring like Amy Amador provides, or any other human services that other organizations who are part of this like Matrix provides. It's a list of people and community members and agencies who said our children will not fail. And if it means a safe egress to and from school, if it means after school events and activities, we will be there to provide that service. But what's more important is that this committee is committed to braid not just the organizations in the community, those human service organizations, but how much more effective are those organizations if we figure out how to braid ourselves in the schools. And so that the principals and the teachers and the counselors can say, you know what? I saw and heard that Kenyatta was homeless yesterday. I need to walk down the hallway and talk to a member or a staff person at Black Family Development and say, can you help Kenyatta's family find housing so that Kenyatta can focus in on school and not have to worry about where she's going to sleep tonight. So we invite you, if anyone has any questions about the committee, we invite you to certainly ask me, ask one of the members you saw stand, and we welcome your presence to make this safety net a reality for us. And so we are excited and energized. For the next slide I want to show you, it's for those of you who may or may not know, it's called a logic model. It's a fancy term for being a diagram that identifies our goals and some of the incremental steps that we believe are necessary to get to ultimately this safe zone, a safety net for Osborn and Clark Park. And so I'm going to ask you to follow along with me. If you open your program, you will see the logic model for Clark and Osborn displayed within your program. I am going to just briefly highlight it. Certainly it can be read in more detail at your leisure, but I want to walk you through the concept of what we're trying to do in this document here. Wait till the page stops turning. Okay, I think we can move on. So what you'll see is the assumption. And the assumption says that we believe that we have a strong foundation in Osborn and Clark Park for school reform and and community revitalization. And we believe that we can develop a pipeline that takes young persons from birth all the way to career and allows our young people to be successful. So in the next column, it says inputs. Who or what are the key resources that are going to help us actualize our assumptions and get to our goals? They are the Promised Neighborhood team, community partners. That's why each of you are here today. We want to share with you what this vision is, because this vision cannot be accomplished without all of us rallying behind what these goals are and on behalf of our children. There are MOU partners that Mrs. Thompson has spoken about earlier, which are also listed in your program. Again, next column, activities. What are some of the particular action steps that we need to take to actualize our goals? We're looking at school reform initiatives. You saw the PowerPoint slide earlier that talked about the processes that each of the schools are going through, and we were able to applaud Earhart for now having met AYP as Mayberry has. But we're continuing to work with them in partnership to achieve some of the other the achievement the young people are seeking for in the school system, in those school buildings. What are we also doing? If you looked at the fourth square down on that column, we're looking at other services to help parents provide for children. I mentioned the example about housing earlier. And again, expanding community policing. Our children should be safe on the way to and from school. Outputs, the next column. What are we thinking that if we provide these activities, what will that produce for us? We want strong student, parent, teacher relationships. I gave the example that a principal or a teacher or a counselor should be able to pick up the phone on behalf of a family member and say, look, community organization, I need your help to rally around this child. That's what it should look like. That should be the output. Next column, short-term and medium-term outcomes. Now these last two columns, if you don't recall anything else I say, these are the most important two columns, because as we continue to move through this Promised Neighborhood work, this is what the communities should begin to reflect. These are some of the foci that were in the individual community plans from Clark Park and Osborn as well. So for example, children attending school. All children attending school. Let us mobilize together to remove barriers for young people being able to go to school, whether they be health, finances, clothing, transportation. Children should be in school, right? That's their job, right? And so our job as a community is to make that possible for them and remove those barriers. For those who are English language learners, there should be available bilingual education opportunities for young people. For those young people with disabilities, they should have access to services and resources in school so that they are not limited in their ability to thrive and soar. Going all the way down to that column, children receive regular medical and dental care, including preventive care. So children, for example, with asthma should not be unable to attend school, because those children have a medical home where their asthmatic and other needs are cared for, so that health is not a barrier for their ability to succeed and participate in school activities. The neighborhood becomes safe and stable. Do those sound wonderful? Yes. Can we achieve those together?
Yes.
So then let's look at the long-term outcomes. When we look back in this work, 10 years later, we should be able to see that in our communities, our young people graduate on time with career and college plans. We should be able to see that we have put in services, health, social, emotional, other services that enhance the well-being of our children. We should have well-rounded children who feel safe, who have been able to grow and thrive and develop appropriately. We have a recognizable pipeline or safety net of services, and we have actually moved some public and social norms on behalf of children, so that some of the things and roadblocks that we see today should not exist in another 10 years from now. Any questions on where we're going? This is the roadmap. So we will revisit this with you. We want you to revisit it and ask questions as we move forward. So then how will we know that we're effective in what we're doing? We have identified this logic model in the previous slide to help us stay on target. In addition to that, we are, as Mrs. Thompson mentioned, using data to measure whether or not we are hitting the milestones we've said that we want to hit. And that's why this longitudinal data system is important, because it'll help us in a manner that's de-identified. In other words, we won't necessarily see names of children, but we should be able to see generally at any point in time, is a child succeeding in critical areas in this Promised Neighborhood venture. And so the Department of Education said that if you are a community in this country that is committed to children through a Promised Neighborhood event, the initiative, that there are certain milestones that nationally we want to see children meeting so that we can measure our effectiveness across this nation. And so there are 14 educational elements to measure as we move through Promised Neighborhood to make sure that children are academically hitting the milestones that they need to measure. And so to go through those, number one is children are ready for kindergarten. Critical component. Because there is such important data that even Harvard has released recently that says that children in early ages aren't assisted with getting ready to get into kindergarten, that it begins the pathway of them being behind for the rest of their lives. And so, for example, the Department of Education is asking us to look at and monitor the percent, which is what you'll see in A, and then the number of young children who demonstrate appropriate functioning between the ages of 0 to 3 and 0 to 5. Then we'll have to look at the number of children and percent of children who have a medical home. Do they have the health care resources necessary to be able to participate in school and prepare for kindergarten? The number and percent of young children who participate in the early learning programs. And that's why programs such as Tony Hart Keys and Head Start are so critical, because we need to make sure that we have opportunities for young children where their young brains are developing to learn and prepare their brains for kindergarten. Next, the number of students and percent of students as we look at the issue of core subjects. So the number and percent of students who are at or above grade level according to 3rd through 8th grade in high school assessments. This is so critical because there is so much research now that identifies the 4th grade as a hallmark grade. And so what they're saying is that if children haven't reached the competencies in the major core subjects at 4th grade, it begins a pathway towards where? Dropout and the prison. That's right. So let's not start at 4th grade. Let's start at early childhood and begin to also assess these core competencies at 3rd grade. Because then if the competencies haven't been met by then, it gives us time to help the young person to get on target. We put a stopgap in the trajectory towards dropout and prison. So then we're also looking at successful middle school to high school transition. Many of you in this room know already that when a young person hits 8th grade, that is a very difficult time because that step from 8th grade to 9th grade is when the first core of folks who are likely or at risk of dropout will drop out in that transition from 8th to 9th grade. So we want to see our young people in Clark Park and Osborn successfully graduate from 8th grade and matriculate into 9th grade and have the resources to succeed when they do that. Then we're also looking, so to do that, we're looking at attendance rates. Again, it's not rocket science, and it's not the only answer either, but at least it's a measure that we can use to know that we're on the right track. Young people graduating from high school. We want 100% of young people to graduate. I love what United Way and Skillman are doing in that they are charging us in Wayne County to begin to look at not 50% or 30% or 80%. Let's move to make sure that all of our young people are graduating and have the resources to do that. Then college and career success. One of the things that I love about this is that the DOE is saying, let's look at college and career success because all children can go to college. all children can go to college. And so for us, we'll begin to look at the number of students with post-secondary degrees who have been able to achieve those without the need for remediation. Now we get into the family and community support indicators. These indicators are critical. They will help us to know that not only are children succeeding academically, but they are surrounded by the safety net that we've spoken about that's helping them to succeed. So we want to know that children are healthy. Again, there are many ways to determine that, but the Department of Education has requested that we identify areas such as these. The number and percent of children participating in 60 minutes of physical activity a day. Now, in some ways, this is a challenge because of the new cultural age that we're in terms of technology. Many of our young people are much more comfortable sitting behind a gaming system, a computer. And so while there is nothing wrong with technology, what this is reminding us of is what most of you and I did because our mamas told us to go outside and play. And in doing so, we explored science, we explored social relationships, we had physical activity, and so it helps us to create a well-rounded, healthy individual child. We're also looking at the percent number of fruits and vegetables that our young people consume. As Ms. Thompson said, a lot of these things we're going to need to have your help to know. We have to send surveys home in some cases to understand what your children are eating and participating in. Please know that this is how your information will be used to help us know that we're on track with meeting the needs of the community and each young person in those communities. Then we're also looking at whether or not children feel safe. Students will tell us, using these surveys that we're going to ask them to complete in school, do you have a way and feel safe on the way to school? Do you have a way safely and feel safe taking that way from school? We're looking at students living in stable communities, that's at the bottom. And we're looking at the issue of student mobility rate. One of the things that we know within our community is that some young people find themselves moving from school to school, and if not from school to school, at least from place to place, having to find a place to lay their head at night. Families are struggling, and so what can we do to begin to decrease this mobility and transiency that some of our families are facing? Next, families and community support learning. So we want families in their home to have the freedom to be able to not only talk with their children about college, but read to them and become a normal pattern of behavior for our children. Because again, most of you know, even more than I do, that there is such a corollary between children being read to every night and their ability to learn vocabulary and master reading. And then lastly, access to tools of the 21st century. The use of computers and technology is such an incredible milestone for us to achieve because one of the things that we know now is that learning can occur 24 hours a day and does not need to be focused just solely in between the walls of the school building. And so we want our young people to have access to 21st century tools. So we believe we can do this, but it's a partnership. We can do it together, correct?
Yes.
Okay.